can bring a sustainable change, that's business. So business should be the instrument for bringing these things. So unless, like I said, some of these values should be embedded in business, business should be embedded in the social change that is happening. So shared values come when you look at the societal growth along with business growth. So to that extent, they are so intertwined, talking about them separately as if they are two separate entities, the mindset should change. And we made a good beginning, and that should propagate. All of us should not talk about, business being separate and earning something, and that goes to, something like giving it back to the society. But as an integral process, we start doing this. That, according to me, is the collective or the shared value that we should build.
Thank you. Uh, so we spoke about affirmative action, and we spoke about the 4 E's, which is education, employment, employability, and entrepreneurship. While it's easy for a lot of us to understand education and employment for the weaker section of society, how does an organization or a company or business sort of work with employability and entrepreneurship?
Thank you, Seema, for this question. And I presume this is coming to me because even though I've retired from the Tata Group, I still advise them on affirmative action. But can I just take a minute to perhaps expand on how we've gone about doing it so that it becomes a process and not just an end result in numbers in entrepreneurship or employability? We have just been telling our companies some basic postulates with regard to India's reality, that tribals and Dalits are the poorest of the poor. They are the most disadvantaged, generally speaking. So if you as a corporate want to reach out to society, start with the poorest of the poor. And they are very impatient to get their due share. And we also say that it is in industry's enlightened self-interest to partner government and society to address this historical disadvantage. Because social stability is key for business, and you can't have social stability unless there's inclusive growth. And we say inclusive growth premises equal opportunity for all. And industry, again, in its own enlightened self-interest, should be part of the solution of ensuring equal opportunity. And we say that the key lever to ensuring equal opportunity for the 300 odd million Dalits and tribals is positive discrimination, where we say everything else being equal, you will give that opportunity to a youth from the Dalit community or the scheduled tribe community when it comes to getting a job, becoming a vendor, getting skilled, or of course, getting education. So these are basic postulates that we have been trying to advocate to our companies. So they're not doing it because it's been ordained or because it might become law tomorrow. They're doing it because that indeed is the right way to do business. Now you asked specifically about, I think, employability and entrepreneurship. Employability is something actually companies keep skilling. So what we are advocating to them is that, again, due share, again, positive discrimination. So make sure that out of the numbers that you are skilling every year, that SC and ST youth get a fair number. So we are making progress on this. Last year, the Tata Group as a group skilled something like 27,000 youth from the Dalit and the tribal communities. That's a drop in the ocean, but that's a beginning. When it comes to entrepreneurship, we make the point, no, let me just, on employability, we also say that it's not about skilling. It's about livelihoods. And if you just skill them and leave them, then you're leaving it half done. So we say you need to be part of them getting some kind of sustainable livelihood. And we're happy that about 50% of those actually do get jobs, whether in the Tata Group or somewhere, or become self-employed or entrepreneurs. Now, as far as entrepreneurship is concerned, we say that you companies should try and embed SC/ST entrepreneurs in the value chain, downstream, upstream, everywhere. We try and partner organizations like the Dalit Indian Chamber of Commerce to help companies do that. And again, we've made some progress. Some 300 odd SC/ST entrepreneurs work with our various companies. And in the last year, a business worth about 120 odd crores was given to them. This is not just as vendors, but we have companies in the area of projects So we encourage them to look at subcontracting to contractors who happen to be from the SC/ST communities in the part of their outsourcing. So these are specific ways in which we are trying to do it, and equally trying to do it in the right way, for the right reasons, and embed indices for measurement of impact and so on.
Ms. Yadav, how difficult is it for organizations to sort of integrate sustainability in the core of their business, from the start to the end? And does it help if your parent company or your leadership, right from the top to the down, is sort of interested in the process?
Yes, to begin with, the process is not very easy, but if you believe in it, and if your leadership has a strong belief that this is the right approach, certainly you can go that path. And at Unilever, our purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. This has been codified in the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan that was launched way back in 2010. And that is our blueprint for sustainable growth. Now, for the Sustainable Living Plan, we set out 3 audacious goals, which is improving health and well-being of more than 1 billion people, reducing environmental impact by half, and enhancing livelihoods of more than 1 million people. Now, these were the audacious goals that we had set out, but we were clear that we have to achieve these goals by 2020. And in order to achieve this, we have 9 commitments with 50 time-bound targets, which we track on quarter-on-quarter basis. And every year we share the progress with our stakeholders. Some of you have been part of the progress that we have been sharing every year. And today, after completing 5 years, we are happy to share with you that we have made a good progress. And not only the company, but our stakeholders, our people, our communities in which we operate, they all believe in that strongly, and they feel happy to see the progress we have made. We have reached out to about 63 million people through our Lifebuoy hand washing program. Our Pureit in-home water purifier has provided about 56 billion liters of safe drinking water to communities at large. And we have created, in fact, we identified water as a priority area beyond our business and the operations in which we operate. And through our Hindustan Unilever Foundation, which is a subsidiary of HUL, we have created capacities to conserve 100 billion liters of water. So that's the kind of impact and the scale that we have created really gives us confidence, and we are quite confident that we are on the right path. And that's what we believe, that increasingly businesses have to have sustainability at the heart. And if you believe in it, you can certainly achieve it. And yes, the businesses cannot do it alone. The government, civil society cannot do it alone. You need to get into partnership with like-minded people. And that's when you will start creating a bigger impact and start making a bigger difference to the society at large.
Aditi, this one is for you. Is this enough, this kind of sharing, or do we need much more sort of information and much more disclosures as far as sustainability is concerned?
I think disclosure is just the starting point, and I would not say that's just the starting point of sustainability, because as Yashmi explained that, the top management and leadership commitment is very crucial. But that's also another starting point. Disclosure, what I have seen, only relates to data, and that's a very unfortunate thing. Most of the time I've been asked that, oh, GRI guidelines, it's very huge, it's very complicated, it's very, expensive, and so on and so forth. But the intent of the GRI guidelines is not that. It's not about data. It's about inculcating a system of reporting. So there's a vast difference between the data in the report versus reporting, which is about the process. So if the process is very strong, which includes stakeholder and a dialogue right from the beginning on what the stakeholder's expectation is to know about the organization's policies, commitments, management systems, and results, then it becomes very easy for the organization to decide which are the most relevant indicators that one can take up, instead of looking at all the 91 indicators, which makes GRI guidelines very, very huge and complicated. This is what we call as principle of materiality. The second point, which I mentioned first, is the stakeholder inclusiveness, which is very important. Because unless we understand what stakeholders are expecting from organizations, it is just useless to do a checklist of boxes and saying that all this information my organization is ready to report on. That doesn't make any sense to the board, doesn't make any sense to the management team, doesn't make any sense to the stakeholders. So that is where I think focus on what matters the most is very crucial. The third point is empowering decisions based on this transparency of information. Unless decisions are made based on the transparent way in which data is disclosed, then the data remains, or the report remains just an addition to the many reports that an organization brings up. And why this is important and reporting process becomes core is ultimately why do we disclose? Ultimately, why do we integrate sustainability into the business strategy? It's about building trust. The building trust will only happen when there is demonstration of accountability. Therefore, reporting process brings in the demonstration of accountability to the stakeholders. And therefore, we just not need to do, data collection and dissemination in a very nice glossy report, but really integrating the process with looking at relevant, issues and impacts, bringing stakeholders on board, and really taking empowered decisions for the sustainability of all.
How do we build trust between businesses and communities? I mean, they're all reporting on their CSR. They're telling us we've spent so many crores, we've done this, we've done that. Is that not enough to build trust?
Well, that's just an external manifestation. You build trust when you mean it. And the intent should come out in terms of your actions, in terms of what you do genuine, and that is how you build trust. So for example, when you talk about businesses that are doing good, or businesses that mean well for the society, and I take from Yashmi's point, like unless you build an ecosystem of people who mean the same, unless you have your suppliers, you have your employees, you serve customers who are aligned, then you're building a critical mass. The trust comes when in a society you build a critical mass and prove that doing good business is profitable and sustainable. So that's point number one. Trust also comes when you showcase examples. Like, there are businesses that have been around for 5 years, for a decade. How many businesses last centuries? And we have here Tatas, we have Levers. And one of the reasons they sustain is not only because they did good business. They did good business, they did profitable business, they had many products, but they were also relevant to the society. The trust comes when you're relevant to the society. If the businesses prove that they can be relevant to the society, then it lasts. Then the society starts believing them, and then the ecosystem builds on. So in my view, trust is something that is created from within, and it should manifest itself. Reporting is just an externalization of it, and it should manifest itself through your actions. People should start inherently, aligning with these organizations, and that is how trust is built.
So the Tata Group has a lot of sort of currency in building trust with the communities. Would you tell us what are the key things that you think work in favor of the organization, and as far as including stakeholders in every sort of step as they go along?
I refer to the fact that the value system that the Tata Group tries to live up to was enunciated by the founder. I mean, every subsequent chairman, every subsequent part of the group leadership has continued to challenge itself to to take that basic principle forward, to live it, and to adopt it and adapt it to the changing business environment, to the challenges that are posed by technology, by innovation, by disruptive business models, and yet retain the anchor in some basic critical values which have been enunciated by the other eminent panelists over here, all of which are embedded in the Tata Group in some or more parts. And it's the fact that you continue to tell yourself again and again that unless you have the sanction of society to conduct business, and that sanction cannot be taken for granted because you earned it 100 years ago, but it needs to be renewed and it needs to be strengthened every single day, then that sort of keeps you on your toes, and you realize that you're on a journey which doesn't really have an end. It is a continuous challenge and a continuous opportunity to continue to give back to society what you're taking from them in a small way.
Aditi, is it enough for the top management, the top one or two key people to be interested in sustainability? Does it trickle down to the rest of them, or does it need more work than that?
I think what Narayan was mentioning, that it is essential, the top management commitment is essential, but it's not sufficient. I would like to kind of reiterate that. Why it is not sufficient? Because it's very easy for a leadership kind of personality to go around and talk about its great policies and to have nicely decorated policies in the CMD's room and in the reception area. But it's very difficult to embed that policy and really implement. I have had experiences working with many organizations where employees were not even aware of how the policies are applied to themselves. And there is no review mechanism of those policies, of how applicable they are and where the crisis were they really implemented or not. So I would say, of course, leadership commitment is very, very crucial. Unless that happens, nothing will move. But it is very important for the same leadership to ensure that all kinds of resources, including people, money, technology, innovation, everything is there to actually move his dreams and vision to become implemented within the organization. And along with it, I think review mechanisms are very, very important. Whether you have yearly review mechanism or quarterly, it doesn't matter, but it has to be a review mechanism. And last of all, I think if we communicate all this to the stakeholders, either through a report or a progress plan, that is the best way a company can really move forward.
So should we make sustainability also mandatory sort of and say now everybody must put this out in the public? Would that help?
Well, when you make something mandatory and when you force, responsibility cannot be forced. Responsibility should be felt from within. So, I'll take an example. In KPMG now, suddenly we're talking about, not suddenly, it is a thought-through process being rolled out. What we talk about, a higher purpose for which you are coming to this organization, a higher purpose for which you are doing your client engagements. Now, what it does over a period of time, it's not mandated that you should go and do certain things beyond, of course, we do earn money, of course, we do have our, intellectual conversations and other things, but there is a higher purpose which everyone thinks that he or she is living for. That makes a difference, and that cannot be mandated, and that is more sustainable. So my point is, some of these things are not mandated in a manner of speaking, but it is a good beginning point. How do you make people think? When you mandate, somebody is forced to think along those lines. So a 2% CSR is good because nobody was thinking along these lines. Many corporates did before, but a lot more of them didn't. So here is a good chance for someone to look at CSR, and hopefully over a period of time, it's not mandated, but it is internalized in a manner of speaking. The second point, you didn't ask that, but I want to mention that is, some of these things come when you catch them young. I think it is too late when they get into corporates, and then suddenly you talk about corporate social responsibility and sustainable values and inclusive behavior. And go back to the B schools, when you teach these kids how to do business, you don't mention any of them And then suddenly you get into the corporate and somebody external comes and preaches how sustainability should be, and more important and even worse, mandated. It doesn't happen. So in my view, some of these should start early on. If not very early, at least in business schools, when they teach how business is done, young minds should know that business is done in an inclusive fashion, and that is sustainable business.
Okay, that should do for us. Any questions from the audience? Anybody? Yes? Please tell us who the question is for.
My name is Subhash Mittal. I represent Social Research Reform Foundation, and I am also part of this study that has been presented today. One of the challenges when we were discussing this study was on the BRR. It was more of a compliance, providing information which is minimum information necessary. What we felt was there was not official information, official things which were, which company could have disclosed voluntarily. Suppose there are cases, there are legal cases companies facing in environment related issues or certain things like that. Nothing is coming in BRR on that. Whether it is, I think I'm not trying to accuse anyone or allege anyone. I'm just trying to raise an issue that how do we build that trust or confidence in BRR? Is that, for example, in Kodaikanal, mercury has been a major issue which has been there for a number of years, mercury contamination. Nothing is there on that aspect on the BRR. So my suggestion here is, or to the panelists here, is why that kind of voluntary disclosure should not be there in the BRR itself, which will help people who are analyzing, the principles of whether it's environment, whether it's something else. It will help, understand companies' position in a much better way.
Is there a question?
That is what I'm saying. That is the question really. Why, can companies not start doing more disclosure on a voluntary basis on issues which they are facing in the public?
Aditi, would you like to answer that?
Actually, there are, when these issues, these incidents happen because of negligence by the company, or for that matter, maybe unawareness of the company, this can get into different kind of shapes and can take different formats. Now, the problem is whether it leads to a controversial story. Most of the time, businesses and other stakeholders take it and stretch it in a way that it becomes a controversial story. And that is where I think most of the framework, they tend to ask, reporting framework, ask whether the company is abiding by the, the local law and or the national law, and are they compliant to those laws or not. Now, if the company says we are compliant to the, the local laws related to water, air, land, waste, and so on and so forth, I don't think the framework can actually play a bigger role than that in order to really do an audit or inspect that whether there are cases of non-compliances. So this is, I think, a challenge for a reporting framework versus the reality through which the company is going. So we need to maybe accept that as an universal difficulty that we all face, whether it's a global guidelines or whether it's a national guidelines. This is my comment. Therefore, we need to really have, I think in this case, we need to work with the stakeholders to understand whether the issues raised are really based on scientific analysis, and the scientific analysis are done through a very credible manner, following all the protocols or not. That's where we need more and more of awareness of stakeholders to make the right noise at the right time with the right facts. This is very important for all of us to understand.
Would you like to add anything, Yashmi?
Since you mentioned Kodai, I'm glad that you've raised that and pointed that out. We definitely take your point, and I agree we should share with it, and we need to be transparent, and that's what we believe in. And we believe that we are responsible for the environment in which we operate. And this is regarding our erstwhile Kodaikanal factory. Since the case has been sub judice, we have mentioned in the last ABRR, and we will be commencing the remediation process soon. But just to share with you, there have been scientific studies done on the environment risk assessment, and none of the studies have proved that there has been any impact on the environment, direct impact, except for some parts of the factory premises. And we are engaging with all the stakeholders. We are taking action to do the remediation at the best international standards. Now, the TNPCB, we are waiting for the go-ahead from TNPCB, and once the government authorities, they give us, we will be commencing the remediation. We are engaging with stakeholders to jointly agree and start working, and that was with our erstwhile factory, but yes, we feel we are taking the due course. But just to give you an assurance, we have conducted independent studies on the impact of the health of the workers as well as the environment, and none of the studies have proved that there has been any direct impact either on the environment or the health of the workers.
I understand. All I was saying, we were talking about trust. I mean, I think in that context, if in the BRR we come out with that kind of information, whichever company, it's not, I could just remember that because I was reading about it yesterday. But there are many other companies who have faced, similar kind of issues. But when we look at the BRR, many of these stories are not coming at all. So we are not even we are not even aware of what is the company's position on some of these issues. That's why I suggest, I think if that can be part of BRR, it will be much better.
Thank you. Yes, anybody else? Yes?
Hi, I'm Sanjeev Vasudev. I work in the international cooperation and social sector, trying to find an entry into the responsible business area. Just taking upon what Subhash mentioned and acknowledged by Aditi, to me, this voluntary disclosure becomes like a baseline which a company is willing to commit itself to. Now, I'm just trying to understand this, and I'd like a response from you. How strong is it legally if 5 years on something is discovered to be, that this data can be used as something to which a company is held responsible and liable to take needed action if it is required to be done?
See, I can't comment on, because this is a voluntary disclosure, I feel that this plays a much bigger responsibility to the organization who is reporting and disclosing this information. Only because from the GRI standpoint, stakeholders are very, very key to not only, looking at what kind of information and which issues are there in a report, but what is the progress. We always ensure that there are targets put, and there are not just policies or, just a big statement saying that we are very conscious about environment, let's say. We always say that please put a target to specific aspects of environment or social dimension which you are working on, which is most material to stakeholders. Now, what you said is 5 years down the line, if they are discovering something and whether there's a legal, stand on that, of course there could be a legal stand, and it could be easily tied with the, the law of the land, because if someone is not complying to that, it is not happening. Or if the targets which are disclosed for, let's say, 2 years, 3 years, and 5 years should be a progressive movement, if it is not, maybe there is no legal standing on saying that you have disclosed and you're not, but it's a reputation, it's a matter of reputation, that the company is kind of committing, but they are not doing what they have committed to. So I would say there is a lot of difference between the legal standing and the stakeholder comment, but also it ties down to the long-term risk of reputation management for the organization.
Okay, one last question. Anybody? Yeah.
Thank you. Viraf Mehta. The question, just continuing this disclosure thing, if the panel feels that the nuances between voluntary and mandatory disclosure that have been discussed are fine. But I think the nuance behind what this country has done with the Right to Information Act, if you're talking about the basics of why we want information, this type of information is not actually a matter of simply mandating it to be reported in its essential spirit or voluntarily disclosed. Both have severe limitations, limitations of even timeliness and access to this type of information by the 30% of our population that don't have such access and poverty. What would be the panel's objection or support then to bring the public impacts of private companies under a right to information? So if you do pollute, why not tell us how much you pollute? And if you don't employ women or people from the SC/ST, we want to know. I think that the spirit of the country is really a right to information. And if it applies to government and we apply that logic without prying into any corporate secrets or licensed things that you have, why not simply would you support that the social environmental impacts of corporations, private entities should be in the public domain and in the form of a type of RTI? Just to underline the point that I think that voluntary and mandatory disclosure does not touch upon the basic spirit of this legislation, which is a basic human right. If you want to enjoy other human rights and you believe these, then why not lobby along with us to make these environmental impacts, for example, completely in the public domain, to the extent that any of us at the back of the envelope can make a query and in that simple format, in real time, not in a report 3 or 6 months later, get that information.
Would you like to answer that?
I can take a shot at it. One, the two reasons why I guess this is not happening. One is ignorance. I need to know what to report. I need to know what are all the things that I should be reporting. There is no norm, there is no yardstick by which I know how many of the underprivileged that I should be including so that I can say whether I have done that or not. There are certain things like, for example, I think in industries where you need to employ so many people from the ITIs and other things, they comply with it and report because it's clear that you need to, so much percentage of your workforce should be from. Unless you have some clear norms for these things, reporting becomes difficult. And second is also the legal angle, like, when you report these things voluntarily out of your own volition, you want to say, and if that is, there is business at the end of the day, right, and that's construed. And so I guess, in my view, two reasons. One, I don't know what to report. Two, I fear if I report that will be misused.
So would you like to add anything?
Viraf, I think if I got you right, you're saying why should not the Right of Information Act be extended to the corporate sector?
On public impacts.
On?
Public impacts that corporations have. Not on everything.
Oh, okay. Not only on the footprint they leave in society. In principle, I can see hardly any reason why any reasonable person would make a principal objection to that. But when it comes down to actually being done, it will immensely add to the business complexity, particularly in India, as it is, and it's been referred to by previous speakers on the panel, that businesses that are responsible, like Tata Group, like Hindustan Unilever, somehow are sort of held to their standards and are the first to get criticized when they slip up even a little bit. And this will further add to it because you will try to be indeed sincere and genuine in addressing those concerns, and you will then perhaps even disclose more, and at the end of the day, it may not add to how sustainable your business may be seen in the short term. So it will just become more complex, but as I said, in principle, how can anybody say that business should be outside of society and not be answerable to the extent that any other pillar of society is answerable?
Thank you, everybody. At Mint, we have worked with the IRBF index, and we've sort of looked at many of the aspects and many of the information that was sort of put out for us. A lot of it was data, and we had to look through it and figure out what worked, what didn't. But it's a start. It's something to sort of look at and see, and maybe this is the way forward, and this is the way we could sort of look at including more and more people and, talking about things that often don't get talked about. Thank you very much.